Okay, so all we need for this project is our loom, some yarn, and our loom stick. So we are making a weaving. I'm gonna leave it open to your creative mind because what we're focusing on is experimenting with this new type of art making. So my first weaving, I kept it pretty small and I wanted to make it look like a house. I probably could have done a better job, but it kind of looks like a pencil to me also. But this was my first weaving. So I made a house. I did a weird kind of angle to make a triangle shape, and I did some stripes. So I want you to have a chance to kind of play with it and do what you want. But the first thing we need to do is dress our loom. So our loom is this big wooden piece of material, and the way that you dress it is just adding your yarn to it. So I'm gonna first loop this around this top notch here, the widest notch on the end, and I'm gonna double knot that. So I'm gonna cross and pull the string under twice, and then I'm gonna loop that around and tighten it. Now I'm doing a white warp. What is behind what you weave into is called your warp. On this one I did black, so you don't see it very much. You can see it coming through, and then that's what's gonna kind of hang off the edges there. So I chose to do white. Now from here, this knot, I'm gonna try and push to the back, and I'm gonna wrap 2 pegs at a time. So instead of doing 1, I'm gonna wrap 2. That way we have a wider space to weave in between. So 2 from my knot, from this wide peg here, I'm going 2. Coming down, and then meeting it straight ahead. So try not to be crisscross. We're gonna go straight ahead, which is just 2 over. And then I'm gonna wrap 2 again, 2, and back up, and 2 again. So we're going 2 by 2. If this ever starts to look uneven, then you've probably skipped or added too many pegs in between. So I wanna leave 2 open, wrap the next 2. Leave 2 open, wrap the next 2. Now we are gonna go anywhere between 10 to 20 pieces. So right now, let's count how many I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I need to do a few more to make it to 10. And look here, that was about to be too thin. I forgot to wrap 2, so I need to go back and make sure I wrap 2. And I'm using my finger to kind of help me to make it hold its place, because sometimes it likes to slip and do just 1. Okay, let's see how many I have now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm gonna stop at 12. You can do anywhere from 10 to 20 wraps. No less than 10, no more than 20. So I'm gonna cut my yarn off. And the same as the knot that I tied here, I'm gonna tie just to these last 2 pegs. So I'm gonna tie a knot, pull it up, and then I'm gonna double it. And since this is gonna be a part of my warp, it's not over here by itself, I'm gonna try and pull this knot around backwards so it doesn't mess with my spacing. So I have my warp all done. I did 12 across. You can do 10 to 20. And I'm gonna pick my first color. I'm going with like just some nature colors because I'm not gonna make anything specific. I wanna show you a few different ways to weave. So I'm gonna start with a light green. I'm gonna find the end of this somewhere. And I'm gonna pull off quite a bit. Now this one has been chopped out, so it's a little messy. Okay, I'm gonna cut off what I need here. There's a big knot, so maybe we're gonna be done with that one. And then I'm gonna take my stick, and this hole I'm gonna put my yarn through And I want this to hold its place, but we are gonna end up cutting it off. So I don't want this knot to be too tight, but I'm gonna double knot it just so it doesn't fall off. So tying it to my stick. And then here is when we start our weaving. So I'm gonna start by going over my first one, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And I just repeat this until I finish. Pull it all the way through. I want a tail hanging off the end. And we don't want to pull it tight all the way to the bottom because we need room to cut it off. So I'm gonna leave quite a big gap from the end up. And then I'm gonna start on the other side. So I finished under, so that means I have to start over. And then repeat it over and under and over and under. Pull that all the way through. And then I have my first set. So I'm gonna kind of squeeze them all together. You can also use my stick, just kind of slide them together, smush them like this. And then I'm just gonna repeat the same process over and over again until I'm happy with how my green looks. Okay, so I kind of ran out of string here. So I'm either gonna untie this knot, or if I can't, just cut it off. So I'm done with my light green. I'm gonna get my dark green and get however much string that I want out of this. And in a second, I'm just gonna show you a few different things that you can do as you weave. Because again, you don't have to do what I'm doing or use the colors I'm using or even go in the same patterns that I'm about to show you. I just want you to have a few ideas on what you can do with weaving. And then I want you to play with it. I want you to experiment. Some people make landscapes. Some people make houses like I did. Or some things are just abstract and simple patterns like stripes and things that are not that complicated. So I want you to have plenty of time to play with it today. And I don't want you to have anything really specific in mind because remember, this is a one day and done project. So we have to have the time to cut it off, like I'll show you at the end, and tie everything off. So again, this is more of an experimental project to learn something new. You may not get very far, and that's okay, as long as we get somewhere. So I'm gonna do a few of this dark green on top of my light green. And then I'm gonna start to show you how to do different shapes, like how my house had a triangle at the top. So let's say I wanted this to start going up in a diagonal. I'm gonna skip this last string. I'm gonna ignore it. So I'm gonna pretend it's not there, which means I need to go over this one. And I'm gonna keep everything the same on this side because I want it to go up this way at a diagonal. So now you can see that I've skipped this one. And now I'm gonna continue to skip that one for a few more turns. So ignore the last string and ignore the last string again. And now when I go back a second time, I'm gonna start to ignore the second to last string so I can keep working my way up. So I'm going through just as normal, and then I'm not gonna touch that second to last string and pull it through. So you can make different angles and lines and shapes by just skipping and ignoring different strings on your warp. So now I'm working my way up this way. Now, if I wanted to go back with a different color and fill this space, I could do that as well. I would just do the exact same thing. So I would be skipping all of these strings and just filling this space. So there's a lot of different things that you can play with when you weave. And my main goal is number 1, for you to understand how to weave, and number 2, to try a few new things. So using a few different colors, maybe doing a few things where you skip like I'm doing now, trying to make different shapes and different patterns or different pictures. So I want you to use your creativity, use your imagination, and just kind of play around. This should be fun, should be an experiment. So I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna finish my whole loom, my whole weaving. I don't really know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna kind of play with it the way that I want you to. So I'm just gonna weave and see what happens, and then go back in and add until I kind of run out of time, and then it'll be time to tie it off, okay? So I'm gonna finish mine, and then I'm gonna teach you how we tie it off. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here. I did kind of like a lake looking scene. And I'm gonna start by tying off anything on the sides together. And if strings are too long and kind of short. And deciding what is actually attached to my loom. So whatever's closest together, I'm just gonna tie together. So these 2 pieces, I'm just gonna lightly double knot. I don't wanna pull it too tight. And then cut those to the knot. These 2 are closest. I'm gonna tie them off together. And cut close to the knot. And this one doesn't have any friends. But I think I have one from the back from my son. So I'm gonna pull one of those over and tie this in a knot. So as long as everything is tied off somehow, that's all that matters, because you don't want this to unravel later. Okay, these 2 are close. I have one more yellow one back here. And then my last 2. Oh, I have that one too. Okay. So I'm gonna tie these 2 together. And then I'm gonna tie this one to the warp, which I did not leave myself enough room to tie. So I'm gonna do my best. Okay. So now what I have to do is I have to get my weaving off of the loom. If you don't know how to tie a knot, you're gonna learn today, because we're about to tie a lot of knots. So I'm gonna cut 2 at a time. Really, I could pick them off of the loom and then cut these 2 off and tie those 2 in a knot. And I definitely want to double knot these, because this is what's holding our whole loom together. And I'm gonna do this about 2 at a time. So I'm gonna do 2 at the bottom, and I'm gonna do 2 at the top. So I've got my 2 at the bottom tied off, and I have a lot more room at the top, which is good. So this is why you don't want to push your loom really far down, because you want to have plenty of room to cut your knots. So now I'm gonna move to the top and tie these 2 in a knot. And the next ones. And then I'm gonna move back to the bottom. So I'm going back and forth. That way this doesn't just completely pop off. If I only did the bottom and finished the bottom without tying any at the top, the top would probably pop off. So I'm gonna finish tying each row together. Okay, I'm gonna put this to the side for a second and get my space cleaned up. So my big bundles of yarn need to go back in the yarn basket. And all of these scrap pieces, I need to make sure to get in the scrap bin. So I'm gonna make sure I've pulled any remaining yarn off of my loom. Get all of these scrap pieces out of my way and put them in the scrap bucket. And now I'm gonna check this out one more time. I'm gonna kind of pull my strings down a little bit. I could cut these shorter if I want. I could braid them together if I want, but I kind of like leaving them long. So the last thing I'm gonna do is just cut these top ones a little shorter to match the bottom ones. But you could cut them all the way down or you could leave them really long. It's up to you. And then I have my weaving complete. Remember, it doesn't have to look like anything. It can be abstract. You can try different shapes. This is for experimenting and it's to learn a new art making technique.